Well, hello, my name is Jim Royal. I am a huge Beatles and Elvis Presley fan and basically classic rock in general. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. And then at the end, if you can do a thumbs up, that's always most appreciated. Today I'm going to be reviewing a classic solo Beatle album. This one comes from Ringo Starr. It's his first solo album. It's called Sentimental Journey. It was originally released back in March of 1970 in the United Kingdom, and then here in the US it was released in April of that year. This is an album that, from my information anyway, made it up to number 22 in the charts in the United States, and it ended up selling 500,000 copies in 3 weeks, from what my info says, and then it was number 15 in the United Kingdom. This is an album basically of standards. These are all cover tunes. Great American Songbook would be one way to class some of the songs on here. Big band, jazz, easy listening, different things. Artists that basically Ringo's parents would have grown up with. In fact, Ringo is quoted as saying regarding this album, "I did it for me mom." Artists like Frank Sinatra, Peggy Lee, Rosemary Clooney, Tony Bennett would be artists that would, record songs like this. And in fact, Ringo was talking about how he remembered as a boy, his parents would be at parties and the adults would sing these sing-along songs to songs like this that they were very familiar with and that they loved and enjoyed. When the Beatles' time was nearing its end, even though he was still a Beatle when he recorded this, he just didn't know what to do. He said, I've been doing this gig for 8 years and now it's done. What am I supposed to do? And he was really bothered and depressed by it. What he ended up doing in October, he rang up George Martin, famous Beatle producer, and asked him, I'd like you to record my album. I'm planning on doing an album of standards. And I'd like you to produce it. So he said, fine. What they decided to do is they had different arranger musicians do all of the songs, each song, and George actually ended up doing one, arranging one song as well. This is credited to the George Martin Orchestra, though I know in one case that there was a song recorded in LA, and I think they used different musicians. This cover here is the Embassy Pub. And what I like about it, what I think is kind of fun, is there's Ringo right down there, and his family is all right there. There are different pictures that are put on there, and these are his family, different relatives. I thought that was a lot of fun. On the back here is Ringo, and he's showing the songs, and then also the arranger for each song. I'm going to show you the record right now. It is on the Apple record label. So I thought this was a really good concept. The idea of Ringo going on familiar territory that people that, the fans would be familiar with. Everybody, even if you weren't into rock, even if you were just into rock music, everybody was familiar with these songs. So it would be perfectly natural to have someone like a Beatle, that you're very familiar with too, sing these songs. He didn't have to prove himself, he didn't have to write new material, because after all, Ringo had only really written 2 songs when he was a Beatle. So I also have to give Ringo credit for doing something that had not been done before that I'm aware of. A rock artist doing these standards. I just had not heard of that before. I know it was in vogue decades later when people like Rod Stewart, recorded the Great American Songbook among other artists. But this was pretty early. And the style of this is you have the musicianship is just absolutely second to none. I mean, it's just done very well. It's done in a very jazzy way. I would say contemporary. There is one song in particular that I'll talk about later on, Have I Told You Lately That I Love You, which was really contemporary, but it does sound like artists of this period, late 60s, early 70s, very professional jazz musicians covering these songs that were decades old by this point. But they pull it off very, very smoothly, very nicely. And I like it because Ringo, he does have limited vocal ability, and I think they did a good job finding the proper material and also his vocal range, fitting the proper key in most cases here. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each song. There's 12 of them. I'm going to tell you who wrote the song, about how old it was when it was really originally written, and then some of the artists who had covered it or maybe made it famous. The first song is called Sentimental Journey. It was originally written in 1944 by Les Brown, Ben Homer, and Bud Green. This would be recorded by Les Brown and his orchestra in 1945 with Doris Day on vocals. She was his vocalist at the time. This was arranged by Richard Perry, who would later produce other Ringo albums in the future. I like it. I think Ringo does a really nice job with it. It's fun, it's just fun. He does a good job. Night and Day is the next song. Cole Porter's song, probably his most famous, or one of them. It was from 1932. Fred Astaire did a version of it. Frank Sinatra is definitely known. It was definitely one of his staples. Just really love this song a lot. Very upbeat Ringo tune on here, done very well. Arranged by Chico O'Farrell. The third one is Whispering Grass, Don't Tell the Trees by Fred and Doris Fisher. This was a father-daughter team. This was written in 1940. You had the Ink Spots do it, and Duke Ellington, and among others. And this was arranged for this album by Ron Goodwin. The fourth song on here is called Bye Bye Blackbird. It was written by Mort Dixon and Ray Henderson in 1926. You had Dean Martin, Miles Davis, Peggy Lee, and later even Paul McCartney did a version of it. This was arranged by Maurice Gibb from the Bee Gees, and actually Maurice at one time was a neighbor of Ringo's. This is my favorite song on the album, period. It stands out. I remember when I was given this album in the mid-'80s from a family friend, I listened to it. I love this song, and I really thought, man, this song could really belong on a Beatles album. If they would have continued, this would have been one of those songs, even if it's a cover tune. I just loved it that much. When I was getting ready to do the review again earlier this year, and today I listened to it, I still feel the same way. I just think it's wonderful. Just a great tune. All right, the next song is called I'm a Fool to Care by Ted Daffin. This was recorded, I didn't have too much information on here, but Fats Domino did a version. Les Paul and Mary Ford, they did it in 1960. I'm not really sure, how old it is, but this was arranged by Klaus Voormann. Klaus Voormann was a friend of the Beatles from their Hamburg days. Later he became, he was a bassist, and he played on some of their solo outings, many of the different Beatles. And he also was an artist in his own right. He was an illustrator, and he did the artwork for the Beatles' Revolver cover. That's him. That's him doing that. And then later he would do the Beatle anthologies in the 90s, those 3 albums, the artwork, cover artwork for that. Really, it's a good tune. I mean, it's okay. It's okay. I think it's good. What I wanted to comment about Bye Bye Blackbird, though, is I love the ukulele on that. I think it's just a real laid-back song. I think it's just done very well, and I think it suits Ringo very superbly. All right, song number 6 is called Stardust. Stardust was written by Hoagy Carmichael and Mitchell Parish from 1927. It is one of the most recorded songs in the 20th century, and it's a song about a song of love. You had artists, Tommy Dorsey did it with his vocalist Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Artie Shaw, Louis Armstrong, among others. This is a really, really good song, and this one was arranged by Paul McCartney. What a great tune, I think it's just done very well. Again, this is one of those, the thing I like about this album, it's not too dreary at all. It's very uplifting, and I think that is when I think of Ringo, that's what I look about. I think of fun, I think of good times with Ringo, and I think he pulls it off very well on this album. But I was surprised that, George Harrison was a huge Hoagie Carmichael fan and used to play ukulele all the time, so I was surprised that Ringo liked it as much also. All right. Song number 7, Blue Turning Gray Over You. This is by Andy Razzoff and Fats Waller. It's from 1929, originally written. It's a jazz standard. I think at the end of this, Ringo says, "Just lost myself, child." They're just having such a good time, and that's what he says at the end. Other artists that did this, Louis Armstrong, Harry James, and Billie Holiday. The arranger on this is Oliver Nelson. All right, the next song is called Love is a Many Splendored Thing. By Sammy Fain and Paul Francis Webster. It's from 1955 from the movie of the same name. In fact, it won an Academy Award for Best Original Song when it first came out. You had the Four Aces do it, among others. This was arranged, Ringo's version was arranged by Quincy Jones. Quincy Jones did this in LA at A&M Studios. He is known for not only being a fine jazz musician, but also a producer. He is known for producing the Michael Jackson records, Thriller and Bad, among many others. This, I believe Hal Blaine, a drummer, was part of the Wrecking Crew, a group of session musicians in LA that did this. He's quoted as saying he did work on the Ringo album, he just doesn't remember the song. And from what I read, Ringo actually wasn't present during the sessions. The backing track was recorded in LA, and then Ringo later recorded it in England. Besides A&M Studios, it was recorded at Abbey Road, this album, Olympia, and Trident Studios. So I found that pretty interesting too. Okay, song number 9 is Dream When You're Feeling Blue by Johnny Mercer. It's from 1944. The Pied Pipers with June Hutton recorded a version of it. Later, Roy Anthony Orchestra, among others. And this was arranged by George Martin. All right, the next song, and I like this song too. It's a fun one. Okay, song number 10 is You Always Hurt the One That You Love. This was written by Alan Roberts and Doris Fisher. Doris was, remember, the daughter of... let's see here, I want to get this right. Yeah, Fred. They wrote Whispering Grass, Don't Tell the Trees. So here she is writing another song. This was, I believe, from 1944. You had the Mills Brothers, Connie Francis, and the Lennon Sisters, among others. The arranger on here was John Dankworth. Okay, song number 11 is called Have I Told You Lately That I Love You? This is by Scott Wiseman. And I think it was 1944. Bing Crosby and the Andrews Sisters did a version of it. The arranger for this is Elmer Bernstein. This is probably the most contemporary song on here sounding. To me, it sounds, I don't know, it just sounds like that period. Just that kind of late 60s, early 70s sound. Just very, very contemporary. Everything else they tried not to make it sound too contemporary, but this was really contemporary sounding. It is good, it is fun, it is memorable. The last song on the album is called Let the Rest of the World Go By. This is from 1919. Ernest Ball and Karen Brennan wrote it. The arranger for this was Les Reed. Mitch Miller was one of the people who made the song popular. Really, really good. I thought, overall, I really liked this album on a scale of 1 to 10. 10 being the best, I would give it a 7. I thought that it was a pretty solid record. I thought it was good. John Lennon was embarrassed by this album. I mean, it's too bad. And I think George Harrison thought it was really good. So I would encourage you to give it a chance. I will say, I will caution you that if you're not a big jazz, jazz person, you might want to stay away from it. But if you do like Ringo and you do appreciate these songs, I would definitely give it a chance. I don't think you'll be disappointed. Thank you very much for watching my video. You have a good day. Take care. Bye.